Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to talk about Kamen Rider. So, I am to, of course, seen every single pilot episode between Kamen Rider, the original series, up into Kamen Rider Geats. I don't know if there's any other Kamen Rider shows out there, but if there is, let me know in the comments below, because I'm sure there probably is. Really, I'm to also want to have this kind of be very much like an introduction kind of thing, how I did with Power Rangers, where I was to kind of tell you like what were my kind of favorite seasons and or favorite pilot episodes and so on and so forth. But then also explain to you that for Kamen Rider, there actually is some actually decent kind of pilot episodes. But then there is also certain things that are very long-winded, and there are also certain episodes that are to really just be kind of the same. But anyways, really, uh, first introduction into Kamen Rider. So, firstly, for the American viewer, that'll immediately go on and just be like, "Hey, every single one of these things are all to be Japanese exclusive shows. Why are you even pitching me this?" And I would go on and say there actually is a American Kamen Rider that is actually to be called Masked Rider, because common means mask, same. So there is an American Masked Rider show that exists out there that, of course, was to have been a spin-off from a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers episode, and that does exist. It's not very good, but it exists anyways. So I want to give you that out there, the American viewer, if you want to just watch a Masked Rider / Kamen Rider thing that's in English, because all of these will be Japanese exclusives, and you'll have to go on and watch the shows in subtitle. My bad, that's just how it is. But where can you go on and watch every single one of these shows if really anything that I say here appeals to you or any of these visuals appeal to you? Well, you can go on and watch Kamen Rider on Tubi, Tubi. Certain seasons are available on Tubi right now, and you can watch, of course, a number of those. Also, every single one of the first 2 episodes of each of these seasons are available on YouTube via one channel. It seems has every 2 episodes of all of these seasons for whatever reason. I don't know why. But then also, you can also go into a Google search for a website called Kiss Asian .la. So Kiss Asian is all one word and .la. And you can possibly watch, I'm hoping, most of the episodes in these seasons. And that may not exactly be a guarantee, because it all depends on like the servers of that website. Because I was to go on and I was to watch certain episodes and some things that I could watch, but not every single thing is possibly there. I'm not guaranteeing you anything, but you could probably watch a good cluster of Kamen Rider for absolutely free upon this app. And then also, you, if liking any of these seasons, could also buy any of the sets or seasons or whatever. You can buy them on eBay. But of course, if you are in America and you want the show in subtitled in English, one thing that I would recommend you going on to doing when you're going through eBay is to find a Region 0 set disc thing copy of whatever Master Rider. It has to be either Region 0 or Region 1. If you can't find any of that in the description or it lists it anywhere, for that Kamen Rider thing, do not get it because more than likely you'll probably get another region disc and you won't be able to play it on whatever your device is. But then also try and see if it is to be subtitled in English. If it doesn't say that somewhere, then I probably wouldn't get that either, regardless of it possibly being the only thing available on eBay. You could probably go on and find any number of things, possibly in any other shopping apps. But again, look for either region 1 or region 0 and subtitled in English. That's all I'm going to say there. So, because some of these seasons are actually really interesting, and then some of them are what they are. So let me get into that. So, in some of the kind of the later seasons of Masked Rider, we really start to see that certain ones have like real themes. The story with that is very generic, but like at least the theme seasons are kind of interesting. We also come into like the early parts of Masked Rider, and quite often the early parts are to have the Masked Rider become a cyborg, and then some of the kind of villains in the early parts of these are kind of fairly interesting. I think a lot of people will eventually like stuff like Masked Rider W, which is the second one to this pink mask here, just because of the museum villain. Or some people may go on and like certain seasons just because of kind of the demonic kind of seasons that tie to them. Or there's certain ones where it's all about the Kamen Rider going into this kind of like reflection world, and I thought that was really interesting, and so on and so forth. There also are, I believe, really just kind of two seasons that are kind of hard to start two seasons. So if I'm to say like, man, like this season was really cool, but like it has like a bunch of tie-ins to prior writers, then really like you may just go on and just want to start there anyways, just to just be like, well, no, I just want to see all the writers in one season, and that's cool. Like Kamen Rider Decade and Kamen Rider Zio or Z I, and it has the dash and then it's O. Decade and Zio, or whatever the pronouncing is, those go into time travel. We technically do have like Kamen Rider Den-O that is to supposedly have time travel, but I feel that Decade and Zio are to really kind of tie in other Kamen Riders into their story. So, especially with the way the very first pilot episode of Decade, we have like a Kamen Rider kind of coming in, and I'm assuming that there might be a whole story with the two of them kind of combating or whatever, because I hadn't seen the second episode. But so, with that said, let's go on and let's kind of break down Kamen Rider generically, and then we'll get into like the story parts of it, the real meat and potatoes, before we get into the actual Kamen Rider action sequences. So, firstly, I have to go on and I have to explain that a Kamen Rider would be compared to Power Rangers or be compared to Guyver. Guyver, of course, is to be a two movie slash anime thing, and Power Rangers, of course, has been on since the dawn of time. It seems it's been on forever, and really, of course, I would have to want to compare Kamen Rider a lot more to Power Rangers because it's just easier. Of course, if you were to be fairly familiar with Power Rangers, you would realize that Power Rangers would always have the morphing sequence where they would have the things on their wrists, or they would do the goofy dance thing with whatever kind of morpher they have for that season. And Kamen Rider does very much a similar thing. Whereas the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers would have the Morpher within their hands, we would come to find that a Kamen Rider more commonly has its Morpher or its transformational driver to be upon its belt. Kind of like, you know how Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, after they would morph, their Morpher would be on their belt buckle? Same thing with Kamen Rider, except for Kamen Rider always has his Morpher or its transformational driver upon its belt consistently. To where at certain points in certain shows, we consistently have the wielder of the Kamen Rider driver belt thing. They would come on to consistently adjust the belt to have certain kind of things about them kind of differ, where it be like a different skin altogether, a different colored skin, a whole different Kamen Rider altogether, and so on and so forth. And so, with that all getting out of the way, story wise, again, you have kind of the early parts of the Kamen Rider where it's all kind of same, where all of them are all becoming cyborgs and whatever. But then eventually in the later kind of seasons, you get it to where like some Kamen Riders are possessed by demons, and that could be really interesting for some people. Or they just kind of come to find that like there's just this chosen one character that eventually becomes the Kamen Rider, and half of the time the people that end up getting chosen by the Kamen Rider thing have like always wanted to become the Kamen Rider for whatever goofy reason. And so in the early parts, I feel in Kamen Rider, like they don't exactly have themes, but there's certain things about them that kind of become really interesting. And then eventually in kind of the later parts, they kind of stick more to like themes. And I can go on and just kind of enjoy the kind of the later Kamen Rider seasons just for its themes. But then also realize that a lot of the even theme parts of the show are kind of very generic. And when I go on and possibly break down these pilot episodes, I hope to better explain that. But there's actually some certain Kamen Rider seasons, regardless of how early or late that they are, I did just kind of find interesting just because they were. And I liked them more than other things. And there's also certain other kind of seasons that are just very dry. Just very dry. But anyways, really I want to go on and I want to explain the very first ever like Kamen Rider thing that I watched. And maybe that'll be the one thing that you'll want to check out first and then get into all this other stuff somewhere down the road. The very first Kamen Rider thing that I saw, besides the American Masked Rider thing, that was a spinoff from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, that Masked Rider thing for American audiences, not really that good from every time that anyone is to go on and talk about it. Really, I was to have gone on and watched the Masked Rider American show, and I don't really remember much about it, except for the villains that are to have been in that show, because when I was to watch Kamen Rider RX, I was to just be like, yeah, this is just like the American Masked Rider thing. And like I remember bits and pieces about it. But so the very first real Kamen Rider thing that I saw was actually X-Aid, because I was to have gone on and kind of learned certain things about these Kamen Rider seasons, and I was to have heard that Kamen Rider X-Aid had this like kind of gaming or video game theme, and I was like, okay, that appeals to me. And also, this Kamen Rider was wildly different than any of the other Kamen Riders because it didn't have a bug theme. It went against that. And I was like, okay, like, this is the first thing that I'm going to check out. And actually, after watching that first pilot episode, I'm like, this is some good stuff. I enjoyed it. Yeah, we had the whole doctor thing that was really goofy, but I overall just enjoyed the episode. Even like all of this stuff, story wise and whatever what have you, honestly to me it does kind of feel very like behind its time. It feels um like very early uh like TV shows, because to me, like half the time we have like the common writer who is like tied to the cops, and I'm like, I really don't like that kind of theme going on. I don't like how the common writer is always attached to some police force. I didn't like that at all. But then also, I guess it was the easiest way to just kind of write common writer. But eventually we get to where like common writer becomes like a separate entity to everything else, and that I thought was kind of more fascinating to watch. Uh, but anyway, so common writer I also felt in kind of the later stuff. I feel like someone came in and just pitched one idea and it just really worked. Or also somebody watched a lot of anime and then came into uh, a common writer pitch with like a anime idea, and again that just worked out. There also is to be like common writer hibiki, that is to weirdly have like a musical thing going on with it, and I'm just like, okay, that's very weird. Um, but hibiki is also to be very slow paced, and I'm like, man, like there are certain other episodes of Common Writer, the pilot episode, where it's very long winded. And I'm like, man, like I can't wait to get to the Common Writer part, because man, are these episodes just very long and drawn out. And when we kind of get a real breakdown of these episodes, I'm gonna kind of really talk about like kind of where I was kind of fascinated with some of these, even if they have kind of very goofy ideas. Um, But also, out of all of these things, there of course is to be one common writer thing that isn't on here that I actually did watch. I did watch Common Writer G, which I guess had some episode about it. So, Common Writer G has it to where the common writer is to use a wine bottle and it puts it into its morpher, its driver, and that I thought was like the weirdest thing. We had the common writer who was at some points making like wine puns, and I'm like, this is just so strange. This is such the strangest thing. I saw a wine bottle go into the driver, and I'm like, that just seems so oddly out of place, but it exists. Um, we have it to where like the common writer ends up becoming this villain at first, like this person who's with this kind of terrorist group, and then he turns around and he realizes that this one woman is like breaking him out of this kind of brainwashing like thing, and he realizes he's like, no, because of the wine that me and this girl had shared, I'm going to go on and I'm going to save these people, and I'm going to take out this monstrous looking threat. And in all honesty, every single one of these pilot episodes, it seems that every single one of them has a spider villain in it. Every single one of them has some spider monster in it, and it just kind of became like very hard to decipher what every single one of these shows were at some point, because all of them end up being almost very similar. So at certain points when I'm going to go on and I'm going to talk about every single one of these episodes, I hope that I won't get any of them completely confused, because man, are they so similar. There was one common writer episode that I did watch that they really made like a very supernatural esh like thing with the writer character, how it came down to like silver bullets and stuff like that. I don't remember what that season was, but and I think the monster of that episode was kind of a very much like wolf-like character or something like that. But like, yeah, there was one season where I was like, man, like this is a real like supernatural season in a common writer thing that wasn't, I don't think, supposed to be supernatural-ish, but more than likely that could probably be a season that I'm gonna go ahead and talk about and not even realize it. because again, there's so much here. So, with that said, how I think I'm going to go on and approach talking about all of these pilot episodes, I think what I really want to do is I want to do kind of the later stuff first and then go backwards. So I know that will probably be like an irksome thing for a lot of people. But here's the thing, the season list of which that I'm going to use to talk about each one of these episodes is going to be the season order from IMDb. If there is any other uh, Kamen Rider thing that exists out in the ether that I do not realize exists, let me know in the comments below, because I will possibly go on and check it out if I can, via the means of which that it is to be available somewhere to see. There's some people that may want to go on and have me talk about the Kamen Rider films, the movies, and whatever. I would be fine with going on and talking about any of those, because I'm sure the fans of those exist somewhere out there. And I do realize that Shin Kamen Rider did recently come out. The movie, I realize, but yeah, I just wanted to just cover the show because I feel like a movie could not go on and give me a clear understanding of what this character really is. But so, anyways, one thing that I want to get out of the way before talking about all these pilots, spoiling all of it, and whatever, what have you, there are two seasons that I feel do tie into all of the other Kamen Riders, and it may not be best to start with those seasons because I feel that for anybody, someone is going to find some visual here that appeals to them and they're like, oh my god, I want to go into Kamen Rider Decade, and they won't know anything about it. Or I want to go into Kamen Rider Zio and I don't know anything about it. But it just looks really cool. Well, Kamen Rider Decade and Kamen Rider Zio or Zio, or like both of those have to deal with time travel, and both of them are tying in to a lot of the other Kamen Riders. If I've already said that somewhere in this review, I apologize, but I feel I've probably said a number of things already, so I'm not even sure anymore. um, but so, anyways, um, of course, Zio is the one that's right here. It looks really cool, and to have seen a cluster of other visuals of that one season, I'm like, man, like that looks freaking awesome. And then of course, Decade is one that's right up front, right here in the pink. Um, when watching both of those, they look really cool. Like Decade just has this huge Kamen Rider battle that happens in the very beginning of it, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, why is there just this huge battle for all these 9 worlds, as if this like some kind of Thor show going on here? I'm like, what the heck is going on? And also, like, I'm not even sure if like this show is going to really clear cut explain everything, because I feel that a lot of the shows are very generic. They really are, and I don't feel like they explain Kamen Rider good enough, especially for a lot of people that may be like brand new audiences coming into this. Um, I really feel that like Kamen Rider has just kind of been out there for as long as it is, that it doesn't feel that it really needs to explain itself, or sometimes it probably does explain itself, but maybe not good enough. I don't know. But so, anyways, with that said, I think it's about time to break down every single one of these pilots and say that Kamen Rider X8 was the one Kamen Rider that I saw, uh, and really from the pilot really enjoyed. We have some kind of comic relief stuff that's kind of going in the early parts of the episode, but then also I thought the battle stuff was really cool with the whole video game theme. But yeah, like that was the very first Kamen Rider thing that I ever saw, and I actually really did enjoy. And then there are going to be some smattering of other certain things on here that I actually really did enjoy. Um, but I don't know if I want to hold it as high as uh, as really Kamen Rider X8. Clearly, because Kamen Rider X8 was really just wildly different than any of the other Kamen Rider things. And when it kind of got down to like all the earlier stuff, I was kind of like, okay, like they're kind of recycling and doing the same thing over and over and over, um, till it kind of gets to a point where they're like, okay, like we've done this enough. But it's also kind of like their Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It's like their bread and butter, so they keep coming back to the earlier Kamen Rider stuff. I don't know why, but it like they just keep going back to it. It's just, I guess it's really that good, but I don't know. Like, I think I might have seen a Kamen Rider movie, but if I really were to have described it to you, like, I don't think I remember it. I think I did see a Kamen Rider movie where there were two Kamen Riders in the film, but I don't really know what that was. I don't really know. Like, I think in the beginning of the movie, like, there's one Kamen Rider and like a later one shows up. But then also, the thing that I really didn't like about the early Kamen Riders was all the motorcycle stuff. They still kind of do that from time to time in all of the other Kamen Rider things because that has to be like a staple, except for maybe Drive where they have like the car. But we'll get to that when we'll get to that. But yeah, but like the whole motorcycle thing to me, I'm like, okay, like, can't you do anything else writer wise besides like, I would actually love it if Kamen Rider was just like a drifter that would just kind of come in and like that's the whole writer thing. Like make it really as vague as possible. Like I honestly would love like a Kamen Rider where like the whole idea of the Kamen Rider is that he has a driver that's kind of this prototype like VCR thing that would eventually have these cassettes that went in it that would be from all these movies that no one has ever heard of, but this one Kamen Rider character has. Like, I think there's a lot of cool ideas that Kamen Rider has not done with its shows that I think could be kind of like a throwback thing, or there's some kind of cool ideas that you can kind of go with Kamen Rider. That off the top of my head, I'm like, ooh, like, it would be a cool idea if they did this. But anyways, one thing right away, certain Kamen Rider episodes are very weird and bizarre. Like besides Kamen Rider G with the whole wine bottle goofy thing that I thought was so weird, um, we also have Kamen Rider Drive that I think just has some weird things about it. Kamen Rider Drive is the very first top one here. Um, Kamen Rider Drive like had like these big massive like bowling pins and bowling balls that kind of appear and I'm like what the heck is that? What's going on there? Then also we had like the Hot Wheels drive that so weird. But anyways, let's get into all these. Let's talk about all of them. I'm going to pause here. I'll get out my list of the Kamen Rider season order. Again, this is from the original Kamen Rider to Kamen Rider Geats. So if there's anything that happens in between that or whatever that I haven't covered on here, my apologies, but that's all I'm covering. And I'm covering from the IMDb list that is to, of course, have the season order. So if there's something that is to be on the IMDb, uh, that I think it does kind of cover some of the TV movies, but I'm not covering those also. Again, whatever we're kind of covering here is whatever I'm kind of covering. So that is what it is. So with that said, I'm going to pause here. I'll get this list out and we'll break down all of these episodes. All right. So every single time I'm going to break down these pilots, I'm going to go on and I'm going to really have to clearly say the name of each Kamen Rider thing so you know which one I'm talking about. But then I'm also going to like say each a name that of course I'm going into. Again, I'm going to cover everything from starting from the bottom, which of course is Master Rider Geats, to all the way to the top, which is the original Master Rider season. For those of you that are to be in the know. But again, I'll be rattling off these names every time I'm go on and talk about each one of these pilots. So first, Kamen Rider Geats. Kamen Rider Geats, the quasi most, I guess, recent Mass Rider show, but there probably might be two others that may be more recent. I'm not sure what these exactly are. Let me know in the comments below what these things are, and maybe I'll look them up somehow. Maybe they might not even be uh, shows. Maybe they might be animes. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below what these are, because these might be other seasons of Kamen Rider, and I couldn't find them anywhere, or they weren't listed in IMDb. I'm just going by the IMDb list. My bad. So, Kamen Rider Geats. I thought that this show was actually really cool looking. You have the Kamen Riders that it seems are doing some bizarre game where it seems that these Kamen Riders are just taking down these villains to get these points to be like the highest rated Kamen Rider. And I was like, okay, that actually is a really interesting idea. And it also reminds me a lot of the anime Darwin's Game. If you've ever gone on and I think hopefully Darwin's Game is still on Netflix. Darwin's Game to me is my favorite anime. I'm really enjoying that anime. I think there are other pretty decent animes out there as well. Like there's Chainsaw Man, which I saw recently and actually really did like. I just saw Go Go Loser Ranger, which if you have never heard of that show, check that out. That feels like a much more dark and grittier Power Ranger story. But regardless, let's get back to Geats because we have a whole lot of stuff to talk about here. So Geats, we have the story setup is to be these two characters, and the guy is to, of course, to have done this job interview, and he's talking to this girl, and they're kind of eating their meal, and all of a sudden this fight breaks out, where all of a sudden all these minions come out, and they're grabbing onto this couple, and this war is breaking out, and that ends up mixing our couple character in with Geats, the white wolf kind of Kamen Rider that we have here, because Geats is a lazy piece of he's lazy, because we come to find the main Geat Kamen Rider character is just being like, well, like I'm gonna sit here because I know I have this one like this one device that can just go and just take down this one villain, so all I need to do is just take down this big huge massive kind of monstrous flying fortress looking thing, and I don't need to like mess with any of the minions because the big fat huge monster thing that's flying in the sky is the only thing that I need to take down. Which, in all honesty, I thought that this Kamen Rider taking on this big huge massive fortress flying thing, I'm like, I don't know if I could really buy that. I just don't know if I can buy this Kamen Rider taking down this huge, massive, monsterish thing that comes flying with this fortress. I'm like, that seems like a season finale thing to do, not like a pilot episode, because, like, you're starting out, really big. Like, you're starting out with, like, the biggest possible thing that a Kamen Rider could take down, and, like, you need to save that for, like, a bigger episode. You need to build up to that. I thought that was so weird. Then also, like, where can you go after that? But yeah, but actually for Kamen Rider Geats, this first episode, I really actually did like. We come to find that the couple that eventually mixes it up with Geats. Eventually, we come to find that we'd have to assume that they're going to become Kamen Riders at some point. That they're going to be handed the Kamen Rider pieces that eventually will lead to them becoming like Geats. Also, this Geats Kamen Rider very much reminds me of an anime called Gantz. 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 Very, very interesting anime, especially if you watch the actual anime and not just the movie. that's I think on Netflix somewhere. I hope, but I don't know. It's been out for too long now. I don't think it is, but it was actually a pretty good movie. And then there's 2 seasons of the anime, which the anime is very adult, very adult. Um, and I just lost the order of this season. Let me pause here. But yeah, so Kamen Rider Geats actually did like some of the Kamen Rider visuals, except like especially like the panda one or the bear looking one and the ox thing. I was like, okay, like those kind of looked very weird looking, especially the big massive head thing. But like I think they were trying to just kind of do a variety of different kinds of mass riders, and that's what they were trying to approach there. Um, but yeah, I just kind of was like, okay, like some of the visuals, like some were good and some were just kind of ugh, they're rough. But again, when kind of looking at every single one of these kind of mass riders throughout the time of which that it has kind of been an existing thing, like some of the Kamen Rider visuals are like awesome looking, and then some are kind of weird, and then some are just kind of like, man, ugh, that's rough. That is some rough. But let's get into Kamen Rider Revise. So, Kamen Rider Revise, of course, is this pink helmet looking Kamen Rider. I don't know what it is with Kamen Rider. At certain points in certain seasons, they just like to do pink stuff. Especially when you kind of look at Kamen Rider X-Aid, like he has kind of a pink outfit when you get past a certain point in the first episode, and also the pink hair. I don't know what it is with pink; they just like it. I guess it's just a wildly different visual. But anyways, Kamen Rider Revised actually is another really interesting season for Kamen Rider, and I actually did like it. We come to find that this seems to be kind of like a demon possession season, which kind of feels very much to me like Death Note, where we come to find our writer eventually gets this like demon within him kind of consistently talking. And we almost kind of get that with Kamen Rider uh, Den-O, but I'll get to that. I'll get to that eventually. So we come to find that this masked writer ends up having to need to control the demon that is within him, to have him just kind of become this sidekick character for him to just kind of like have this like Batman and Robin kind of situation with this demon to fight off all these villains. And when we come to a head where our masked writer could lose his whole entire family, so he has to become this writer, like all of this buildup was actually to come into a very interesting episode. I think for this revised character, we also have him being kind of a worker in this hotel like location, and I thought that that was kind of rather interesting. I think there's a lot of ways where you can kind of really work in a pretty good story with that kind of character, and I think Revise is actually pretty interesting, and I want to go on and watch other episodes, as well as also Geats whenever I can get the time. Kamen Rider Saber. So we would of course also realize that there is a Kamen Rider Blade. So like if we get every single Kamen Rider that just loves like swords and that's about it, like very rarely do we ever get like Kamen Riders with other things than just swords. It's a constant in the show. Man, would I just love I would just love more Kamen Riders that don't have blades, because eventually I'm like, I just want something different. I don't like guns, but give me something else. Like, give me a hammer, give me some kind of other weird, obscure weapon. Give me a nunchuck. Give me something other than a blade, for Christ's sakes. Because I'm like, man, not only do we have the Kamen Rider that has to kind of smash through all these guys, which I thought was awesome, but then we also have him like consistently with these blade weapons, and then every single time he has to murder whoever the monster is with this critical kick thing, and that's most of the attacks that happen in most of these Kamen Rider things. I think Kamen Rider Deno for its pilot episode, I think, was the only one that didn't have like a critical kick move to kill the monster. But so, anyways, Kamen Rider Saber. Kamen Rider Saber is just very weird looking. It's very weird. So, because it concentrates on like books or novels as its theme, and in all honesty, like in the very first episode, we have like a lot of crazy CGI stuff going on, and we really have the Kamen Rider whose drive morpher thing is like a book, and I'm like, this is so bizarre. Like the whole CGI thing and the whole book thing, like really just kind of took me out of everything to do with Kamen Rider. We have this character who's going on and telling this story to these kids, and then eventually he kind of just becomes the Kamen Rider in the story, and yeah, it's a very weird thing, and I really honestly just did not like it. I really didn't like it at all. But I'm just gonna move on into Zero One. So Kamen Rider Zero One has a artificial intelligence theme to it, and I was like, okay, we're having another Kamen Rider season theme. Cool. Uh, the way that they kind of approach the story going into this episode, I was kind of like, ugh, it's very rough. We really just have this comedian who is really not good at comedy, and we even have this artificial or this robot secretary that's going on and telling like this comedian guy that he's not good at comedy. And to me, like this whole anime comes very much off like the anime Big O, where you kind of have this Batman like character that eventually becomes Kamen Rider. And we even get like a kind of a Batman Kamen Rider in a earlier season, and I'll get to that. It's kind of a mixture of Superman and Batman, but we'll get to that. And eventually, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But Zero One, I think, has some good ideas, and I do like the approach that it has with the mask and how it is. Like it also has some possibilities that like the characters are to be kind of neon, and I like that design anyways. Cosmetically, it's kind of cool. Um, but yeah, so we eventually get to this comedian who is going to inherit this rich company that is to be connected to these AI, these robots. And the robots end up, because of some kind of tech genius, going horribly awry and starting to kill people. And I think we actually don't get a spider villain in this episode. So we get the comedian that has to realize that he needs to become this driver to save these people who of course want to laugh. That's all they've ever wanted to do in their life was to laugh. So we have the Kamen Rider becoming the Kamen Rider to save all these people, and then he realizes that like, well, like his time of being a comedian is over, and he should move on to be the Kamen Rider now, and plus also be an inheritor of all this money, become this Bruce Wayne like character. So I would say like Zero One, like it's very kind of mid for me. Like I would say it's kind of very 5 out of 10. Um, just because the story is just very sloppy, but there's some interesting things there. It's very just 5 out of 10. Um, so Kamen Rider Zio or ZIO, the dash thing, we come to find that I think this season actually gets better with episodes. And we also come to find that the Kamen Rider is mixing it up even in the first episode with other Kamen Riders, which I'm like, okay, this is cool. I think that it's Kamen Rider Build and another Kamen Rider, which I don't remember which one it is. But I do know that Kamen Rider Build is is in the early parts of this, and and so really like we get this character that time travels, and really it's to be very much interesting, and that's all I really remember about it. I don't remember much about this one, but yeah, if anything, watching kind of the history of this one Kamen Rider character, a lot of the stuff that ends up getting like rolled in as far as visual goes is just great. I definitely want to go on and recheck this show out again and kind of watch the rest of it eventually when I get to know more of these other Kamen Riders a little bit better. But so, anyways, going into Kamen Rider Build, because I just referenced it in the other show. Kamen Rider Build actually has a really, really good first pilot episode. It's a little goofy, but like it's fun. You have the Kamen Rider character that bizarrely has this like hair consistently sticking up in the back for whatever goofy reason. There also was another like Kamen Rider that has this bizarre thing about underwear. Don't remember exactly which Kamen Rider exactly that is. I think that might be tied in with that could be Kamen Rider 555 or Kamen Rider 555 or Fiva or whatever goofy thing that they have um, set for that. I think that might be Kamen Rider Fiva. But anyways, build, we come to find that there is a whole like kind of story kind of going on with Japan besides just what's going on with build story. We have to come to find out that like Japan has been kind of like separated in three sections, and uh, we have to kind of find out about all of like the economics of what's going on in Japan before we even get into really focusing on the whole build thing. And we come to find out that this kind of like meteor thing uh, ends up becoming a possible like power source that they're kind of looking into and experimenting on and trying to figure out what's going on with that. And so in the meantime, we have this scientist or this inventor that eventually has these kind of weird, goofy little shaker things that eventually he makes into a drive and becomes Kamen Rider Build, where we have kind of these two like smacking together uh like skins into one, kind of like how Kamen Rider W will be, where we come to find that Kamen Rider W has like two characters kind of smash into one Kamen Rider, uh, whereas we just have Build, who's just one person, but bizarrely, that one Kamen Rider has these kind of two skins to it, and I don't know why. Um, I don't think it's like heavily explained in the first pilot episode, but we have this Kamen Rider who is approaching its fights with science, which I kind of thought was fascinating. Like, yeah, we have at one point where all these equations are kind of like all around this monster, and we even get to a point where the Kamen Rider, when it's doing its kick, is to have this whole graph that showcases exactly where this person should land. And I was like, okay, this is really fascinating in a different kind of approach, as well as also like I think Kamen Rider Build, the action parts of it are really fascinating, and plus we're kind of getting a break between story and Kamen Rider action, and even the first pilot episode. So I thought Kamen Rider Build is going to be one of those where it's going to be like one of the top Kamen Rider seasons, because I feel anybody who is to probably ever talk about Build is to probably say that it's one of the top ones, if not one of their favorites. So uh, in the first pilot episode also we have this like boxer character that eventually goes on to like try to take down one of the monsters, and it's like, dude, like I appreciate that you attempt that you're kind of courageous going up against this monster, but dude, you're gonna fail. So we have the Kamen Rider that's kind of telling this boxer, it's like, hey man, like just step aside. It's not gonna work out for you on this day. So I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna duke it out with this monster. And we come to find that this kind of we come to find that this boxer is on the run, that he could be accused of killing somebody. So like there's a whole interesting story to just kind of see where this side character, where his story is going to play out beyond just the Kamen Rider character. So it's really just, there's a lot of fascinating stuff going on there, and I'm wondering or curious if the boxer character is going to eventually become a Kamen Rider himself. Maybe, because it feels like not only we have like one Kamen Rider in these certain seasons, but then there's certain times where they have like multiple Kamen Riders that all become Kamen Riders for one reason or another. It just happens that way. But again, so Kamen Rider X8, one of the ones that I liked the most. We come to find in uh, this one, we have a story of the young Hojo, but then the more current Hojo. So really, you can tell how much I liked really this one, but how I'm probably going to be talking about it. Because I saw this one episode 3 or 4 times. That's how much I liked it. I was like, am I sure I'm liking this? So we come to find that young Hojo is to have needed a surgery done in this hospital. And we have the very generic kind of beginning of this where the doctors are like, yeah, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to save this kid. I'm going to save him. Generic, but still. Which comes to find because of that history, because of that story, we have this character that becomes driven to become a doctor, which I actually really liked. But then also bizarrely, we have the doctor that gives the kid like the gaming console. I'm like, how much money did that gaming console like cost? And you're just handing him over that? I'm like, what? But so we come to find that this one goofy doctor is to be so into like these video games, like, oh my god, oh yeah, I'm getting into them. And then he realizes that he has to go on and do these doctor appointments. And we come to find that one kid who's coming into this appointment because he's not eating. It's like, well, hey kid, you're eating, but you're eating like the snacks. You're not eating the actual food. And so we eventually come to find that Hojo has this one kid called Sota. And this one kid is, of course, being very ill, very sick. And Hojo has to come up with a cure for this kid, but like he has this cyber virus inside of him. So it's nothing that he can, with modern medicine, cure. So we come to find that there is some other suit and tie Asana girl that is to go on and the reason why I'm talking about this whole episode, I'm breaking it all down, is because one, I was going to review it anyways. I was going to do like 3 different Kamen Rider episodes and review it, and so like I broke it all down. But so we have Asana who is looking for this genius gamer known as M. And so she's like, okay, well, I need to go to this convention, this gaming convention, to find this gamer. And we turn around and have, luckily, this one doctor become this genius gamer. And we come to find that Soda ends up getting this virus within inside of him that makes him become this weird meatballish looking monster. It's very weird. And so we have Hojo that is forced to become this Kamen Rider to cure his patient. And after that, after he takes down the meatball virus, comes to find out that it's like, okay, well, this isn't over because there was another virus thing inside of him that you now have to fight off. And it's bizarrely with all of these like these turkey head looking minions and this salt uh, shaker looking thing is to be like the boss salty is to be what he's called. And we go on to have our writer who is to just deck through all of these people, and is to of course do the massive kick thing to kill off this salty boss. And to me, I was like, man, this was just so enjoyable and has some decent comedy to it, and really just enjoyed it. Yeah. If I haven't sold it enough, I probably haven't sold it enough well. But yeah, but this first episode, chef's kiss. Bizarrely. There's some weird things about it, like the monsters were weird. Turkey head thing, I was like, what the heck is that? But maybe at some point, I may be assuming maybe the villains that had something to do with maybe unhealthy foods. Maybe that was the whole like reasoning for why they looked the way they looked. I don't know. But then again, salt I don't think is necessarily bad for you, because in all honesty, if you eat nothing for 7 days, you still need salt in your body um, to like still go on throughout your days, or you're going to get really, really sick. So salt is not 100% a bad thing. It's just the portion of salt that you are to take is to be a bad thing. Of course, with a combination of other foods. Whatever. I'm going far too into this. So, Kamen Rider Ghost. Kamen Rider Ghost is a very much martial arts kind of thing to it. To me, like, I wanted to quickly compare this to like Power Rangers Samurai. That's how much it really has this like martial arts like flavor to it. And so we come to find that this Kamen Rider like has a really cool like transformation sequence where we have like the cloak or the gi thing that it like puts on, like it just kind of flies into the sky, and it's really cool looking. Really enjoyed it. Um, but yeah, so we have a character that eventually is to kind of turn into being uh, this ghost-like character, and certain parts of it comes off as very much like a samurai kind of theme, and then some of it's karate themed, so it kind of mixes it up a little bit. Um, Here's where we get like I think we have a Kamen Rider Skyrider where like he actually flies, and I think actually Kamen Rider Ghost he technically flies. Uh, but yeah, but I thought Ghost was something that I really wanted to like see more of. So definitely, I would say uh, Kamen Rider Ghost is probably gonna be one where people eventually, once they kind of get through the gambit of other kind of Kamen Rider seasons, eventually go into Ghost because it actually is really interesting. And really, that's all I would probably want to go on and just kind of grade it or whatever, because I feel like I haven't done a good enough job of grading these. But I guess for grading, I think build is a must see. Um, Zio or the ZIO one, see eventually. Once you kind of get through all the other kind of seasons, check that one out. 01, I think if you kind of run out of Kamen Rider things to check out, check that one out, but at a later time. Uh, the artificial thing is not good enough to 100% like sell that show. So moving on. So Kamen Rider Drive. Kamen Rider Drive, that very first pilot episode is freaking weird. It really is. I don't know if I've said anything about Kamen Rider Drive already, but it's weird. So you come to find that the Kamen Rider for this season like seems to be very like tied to some kind of organization. I don't know if it's police or not, but it's some kind of goofy organization. And so we come to find that like this season is to be very much like Knight Rider. I guess that was to be the approach, because evidently somebody really liked the show Knight Rider and just wanted to do a Kamen Rider season that's somewhat similar to that. Um, I really wanted to probably compare this to any number of like Power Ranger seasons, but probably the only one that probably would immediately have in anyone's minds to just be like, oh, you're gonna compare it to any of the like the car seasons, and I honestly would say no. I want to compare like honestly Power Rangers Drive, Kamen Rider Drive would probably be most compared to either like Power Rangers Dino Fury or Power Rangers Beast Morphers. That's what I kind of feel Kamen Rider Drive feels like to me. We come to find that Drive, eventually he has these like wheels that are on his chest, and eventually they all come like flying out, and I thought that that was kind of cool. But in the early parts of this, we have this character who's getting this voice that is consistently talking to him, to the point of this almost being very like Transformers kind of movie esh like, or show esh, or no, the Shia LaBeouf kind of movie is kind of like how we get Drive here. So we have this character that is consistently talking to him, and then when we get our rider that is wearing the Drive, the belt thing, like this character is consistently talking to him, and we have at some point where, like, of course, the character is to go into the fighting, uh, and again, um, like all the wheels, like it's just a big wheel thing about this character. And at some point, like when he's kind of going through all the little cars that come like hot wheeling around his body for whatever goofy reason, because in the very beginning of this, we just have like the bizarrish like Hot Wheel cars that are just kind of coming in and just kind of taking down all these monsters in the very early part of this episode, as well as the bowling pins and whatever the heck that was. What was that? What was that show? Help me understand what that meant. I am so confused. But yeah, so we have the Hot Wheel cars that are just kind of flying around and killing all the monsters in the beginning of this episode. And I was just so like, what? But then eventually we have the Kamen Rider that uses all the Hot Wheel cars to transform into other kind of wheel things, and then eventually that takes out all the monsters, or the monster. I was like, okay, interesting enough. I don't know if Kamen Rider Drive would be like the first ever Kamen Rider you would get into, but I honestly thought the most appeal about this show was just because of how weird it was. So it was one of those where it was like a car crash, and I couldn't look away, was probably the appeal that Kamen Rider Drive has. It's so weird. I don't know, like really I haven't seen enough Super Sentai from Power Rangers to really know how weird that show is, because I heard or whispered of certain things about Super Sentai, and I had seen like one Power Rangers Dino Thunder episode that was kind of Super Sentai, and I'm a little leery about going into some Sentai. I'm scared. I'm worried that it's going to be so weird and it's going to ruin Power Rangers for me forever. I'm worried. But let's move on. So, Kamen Rider Gaim. Actually, surprisingly interesting. It's not bad. Like, I feel like Gaim is a little bit more interesting than Drive is. But also, we have that whole, like, dance off thing in the early parts of this episode. So, we come to find these two dance crews with this kind of radio personality guy. And we have them come in, and so we technically have a dance off, but then we also have these two like go into having these monsters appear and fight off, and of course one beats the other, and we have all these people voting on who is the better dance crew or who the better crew is, and everybody's going on and picking the barons. And so bizarrely, kind of after that kind of whole showing, we kind of just bizarrely have weird clips of like the characters just kind of dancing or practicing in the background. But eventually this all comes to a head where we have the two couple that are kind of making their way uh, into one of them finding this drive in this bizarrish uh, dimensional hole thing. And I was like, okay, that could, I guess, be an interesting way to come up with the Kamen Rider driver is in this whole weird portal world thing. But then also, we come to find that another character is to have also gotten this like Kamen Rider drive, and he's like texting his friend. It's like, hey, look what this thing is. And so, like, I guess we have to go on and say that maybe they're getting this Kamen Rider equipment from this other world that doesn't quite clearly seem to be explained in this first episode. But so we come to find our characters find this drive in this other alternate world, but then there's a monster that comes out of it. And so we have the Kamen Rider that has to go on and has to transform. And so bizarrely, once this Kamen Rider transforms and he has no clue what he's doing, eventually gets some cues from this weird girl that looks just like his person that he was with, this Maya. And she kind of tells him a little bit of what to do, and then he's like, okay, I guess I'll do this. I'll combine these swords together. Oh, I'll. And so, yeah, so first off, we only get the orange Kamen Rider. And I'm hoping in other episodes we get other fruits mixed together, because it seems that he had an orange and he had a strawberry. So I'm kind of interested to see what all these other Kamen Riders are with this whole kind of fruit gimmick. It just seems so like it just seems so odd. But then again, I'm like, I just want to see what this is. It's so weird. It's so weirdly put together, and the whole dancing thing was just so strange also. But like so much about it was like another like car crash, and I couldn't look away from it. Yeah, it was so weird. But let's move on. So next one up, of course, is the Kamen Rider Wizard. And of course, if you know me, I like supernatural stuff. So I was immediately won over by Kamen Rider Wizard. This comes off very much like Doctor Strange like. We even have a point where the Kamen Rider is to get arrested, and he ends up using some kind of goofy kind of witchcraft to be able to get out of said prison and to be able to go after the villains in this episode. As well as it also seems that a character was to have gone on and gotten poisoned, and so the wizard has to go on and figure out a way to defeat the monster that's within this person that's poisoned to get them to be healthy again. I feel like this is going to be another like kind of Kamen Rider cop show, but like I don't know, it looked really good. I really enjoyed it. I really would recommend a lot of people going on and after checking out Kamen Rider X8 to turn around and check out Kamen Rider Wizard. Again, there's a weird part where like the Kamen Rider Wizard becomes tiny and jumps on this blue horse. That I thought was kind of weird, but like it was an interesting enough show. I thought it was pretty good. Really could be the top 5. So really out of the gate right now, out of all of these, I would really heavily recommend first Kamen Rider X8, then Kamen Rider Wizard, then Kamen Rider Build, I think, is inevitable. You're gonna watch that at some point. Maybe Kamen Rider Ghost, and then eventually, like, kind of the mixture of any of the ones that I just started to earlier on say, like Geats or Revise. You might like some of them too. But moving on. Force or Forze, the the spaceship looking one, the white, the thing that's right here. Forze, or the Kamen Rider that I'm going to talk about now, has a high school theme. And supposedly the whole thing of the reason why they did this season was there was a anniversary of outer space stuff. So they went on to do this season that has something to do with outer space stuff. So we have this high school theme, and man, do they go like really heavy into this high school theme. Because we have the Kamen Rider who is to see that this note is kind of floating in this water, and he runs out and he jumps in the water after it to go and get it, to then slap this note on this guy's desk. And you could of course really tell which Kamen Rider season I was really interested in when I'm talking about all these, and a lot of them are very much in detail and some of them aren't, because there's a lot of shit to remember. But also, there's some stuff that just really isn't as good as other things, story wise. There's certain things about Kamen Rider where the story just freaking sucks. It does. And it's miserable to just watch, and it just is. And there's certain things where it's like, oh, I think I can watch this. I think I can really gravitate to this. But anyways, we have the Kamen Rider who slaps the note on the guy's desk, because I guess at some point, I guess the two of them were to be friends. But then again, the one redheaded guy is a douche, so that is what it is. So we come to find that the new slick-haired guy in town is to eventually want to hit on these girls. And these girls are all of a sudden attached to these jocks because, of course, they're the cheerleaders, and these are the football jocks. Like, I don't really know if Japan has American football, but maybe they do. I don't know. Maybe it's rugby, because the guy ends up getting into the 3-point stance, and I'm like, do they have American football there? That is a question that I would need to ask. Of course, for any of you Japanese people who are to, of course, also speak English. I'm not trying to, like, I feel like also, like, for me to go on and critique any of these Kamen Rider episodes is to also insult a culture, which I'm also not trying to do. Like, Japan might have their own kind of way of doing story and whatever, and for me not liking it, or for me really enjoying it, really is to have me also say that I've also enjoyed anime and all kinds of other stuff that has come from Japan. And so really I have to go on and be critical about everything regardless of where it comes from, and say that oh, this is really weird, because to me it just is. It's like, well, that's just the way all of the Japanese shows are. They're just really weird. I'm like, well, sorry. Me pointing out is probably the very obvious, but regardless. So we come to find that the slick-haired, because he has to kind of consistently do this in the episode, because he's kind of the greaser, Kamen Rider-esque character. He's very Elvis. It is what it really is. That kind of character. Very cool though. Really like this character. So we have the Kamen Rider who eventually is mixing up with these jocks because the Kamen Rider hit on one of the cheerleaders. And so we come to find that the jocks are like, okay, we're going to take this guy outside and we're going to beat the crap out of him. Well, all of a sudden, while they're just kind of punching around this Kamen Rider, all of a sudden this red monster just comes out of nowhere and he's like, "Hey, I'm coming in. I'm gonna have some fun." And so we have all the characters that are just like, "Oh my god, like this is a monster thing. Like, what the heck is this?" And so we come to find that some of the jock characters are kind of looking at it and they're just kind of like, "Okay, let's get away." But then the Kamen Rider is just like, "No, man, like I'm just gonna take a pipe and just clang clang on this thing." So we come to find out from time to time, a lot of Kamen Riders, when they feel like they need to like fight this monster, they just weirdly have to just take these metal pipes that just come out of nowhere and just bang this monster, because that seems to be the one thing that they consistently try. And then we have this this metal rod that the monsters always just bend and just show how strong they are. That seems to be a very much staple that Kamen Rider episodes seem to do, and that's the thing that I've consistently seen throughout a bulk of these pilots. I don't know why, but it is what it is. So we have the Kamen Rider who's still in human form, who doesn't have his belt yet. He goes on to like try and hit this thing with this metal rod or this metal stick, and nothing happens with it. And so he gets chucked pretty hard, and then we all of a sudden have this kind of metal, huge, massive CGI'd robot that's coming in, kind of like the alien or aliens kind of yellow robot thing that comes into that movie. And so we have this kind of like bulldozer like weird construction thing that is to try to go on and take out this monster. It doesn't kill it, but it kind of just forces the separation between the monster attacking and so on and so forth. So the monster runs off, and so we now come to find that the redheaded kid and the girl that they were with, like they have this whole like hidden base inside of this school somewhere. And the whole hidden base is to be out in like seemingly like a almost in like space, but it's like a whole secret door that goes into this hideaway that's in space somewhere. It's weird. Um, but in the very beginning of this whole episode, we come to find like these two astronauts like fighting over this one thing, and you would have to assume that the villain astronaut is to be a monster, and like they don't really explain that. I don't. They don't really explain that. It is what it is. But anyways, like I probably won't explain half of the things that happen in half of these pilots, but it is what it is. So we have the Kamen Rider character, the slickback, the greaser character that eventually follows them into this secret hideout, and he's kind of like floating and he's kind of goofy and whatever. So we eventually have again where this monster is wreaking havoc on the school. So the girl decides that this one guy is deserving enough to get this belt and become this Kamen Rider. And so he has to kind of figure out like, okay, like, well, what do I do? Like, how do I turn this thing on? How do I do the dance that every one of these other Kamen Riders have ever done in their lives? And so he, of course, becomes the Kamen Rider, but he has to figure out what all the weird, goofy belt things do, because he has a bunch of these kind of these little gadgets that are on his belt that he now has to figure out what all they do. And come to find out, the way of which that this is like approach is almost like a Megazord. Like Kamen Rider Kamen Rider, this one like seems very much like a Megazord more than it does like a regular Power Ranger. It's weird because when he touches all these buttons and he switches on this belt like thing, it all of a sudden has like this rocket come out of like one of his arms, and he has this like radar thing in this other one, and he has this leg that is to be kind of very much like a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers like leg from the Zord, and it shoots out all these rockets. And we come to find that this radar thing in his one arm is to kind of pinpoint accurately shoot the rockets out of the other leg thing. So it's like a whole ordeal. It's a whole ordeal going on here. So we come to find that this Kamen Rider is figuring out all of these kind of different leg things that all work together to eventually have him do the mega kick critical strike move that every single Kamen Rider has to go on and do, where like we have the rocket that kind of shoots him up, but then we also have the drill that goes down from the one leg. And so I'm like, okay, like it honestly feels like all of these pieces can eventually make for some interesting episodes where how is he going to use these certain pieces individually. Like the drill thing could be kind of really cool to see like how he might drill into one of these monsters, or the rocket thing could be like him like punching through one of the monsters. It could be cool that way. And in all honesty, I think Force, however this one is, again, is probably one of the top Kamen Rider seasons to see. I feel that this one is interesting enough, and I think there's enough story there where I think that this could be something really good eventually at some point. Moving on, Kamen Rider O's. Kamen Rider OOO, Triple O. Kamen Rider with a bunch of O's. Really, for this one, I thought it was good. I thought it was good. Kamen Rider has this. Kamen Rider O's has these villains called Greed, and I thought that was the coolest thing. Could be the most simplistic thing, but I thought that was amazing. We bizarrely have this one guy who's just kind of effing off, and he's like making these like birthday cakes. He's like, "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, Greed, happy birthday." I'm like, this is weird. This is some weird stuff going on. This one guy in just the shadows is just singing birthday songs to Happy Birthday O's, Kamen Rider O's, and he's like, "Happy birthday, Greed." I'm like, who the heck is that guy? Why does he exist? Why is he making cakes? The world is ending and he's making freaking cakes. What's wrong with this guy? But yeah, so we have the Greed, and they're going into this obviously like just jewelry store, and they're like stealing all the Greed, and one of the Greed like minion things is just eating the jewelry, and like we all of a sudden see like the spirit or the soul or whatever of this one woman, like they just suck the Greed out of her. And I was like, man, like there is something really cool here. And we also get to a point where we see the Kamen Rider in this episode. The Kamen Rider is to be a mixture of animals. And I was like, you know what? That is a good idea. It looks very freaking weird. The Kamen Rider like just doesn't look cosmetically that great looking, but there's some potential there to just kind of get used to this Kamen Rider. But if anything, this is, I think, another just straight up go to Kamen Rider season. Just because of the villains. Like, the villains looked so interesting to me, even though I was just so weirded out by that birthday song throughout this whole episode. Yeah. The Greed. You gotta check them out. They're freaking awesome. And we're probably gonna get back to back like villains that are actually really interesting. But then maybe the Kamen Rider characters aren't all that great. Like, really kind of fascinating to me, especially when we get into the next one. But yeah, so definitely Kamen Rider O's is probably, maybe it's one of those where like down the line you might want to check out. It's not like a must see, but it's probably in my maybe top 5. I like the villains. So the villains win over. I think it's mainly because greed is one of the seven deadly sins. So like that was easily appealing to me. I kind of want to see where this is going. But anyways, next up is Kamen Rider W or Kamen Rider O. Like I don't know. Like I think the way that they pronounce or the double Kamen Rider Double, I think is how they pronounce this also. But I'm just gonna pronounce it Kamen Rider W. W, cause I'm American. So we come to find that Kamen Rider W is two characters smashing into one. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting. But the story is to be just like a detective story, and I always hate those. And the whole investigation that they kind of go into in this first episode, I think is just boring. And it kind of gets to the point where we get the hat detective who's kind of doing this investigation, and it leads the other character who consistently kind of astro projects out to kind of look through all these books and figure out these things. And this first episode, I think, really comes down to like the investigator, like trying to figure out like the place of where he's living, like what had happened to uh, the guy who had died, who we now have to realize like there's another person that owns that building now. And so, really, we come to have me say that the only thing really interesting about this first episode is eventually when we get the two Kamen Riders together. And once we get the two Kamen Riders together and they're doing their Kamen Rider thing, like I actually thought what the Kamen Rider stuff was doing, like especially when um they kind of change the colors and they go from like green to purple or green to yellow or whatever those uh seemingly combinations of colors were. Because I think no, wait, we went from, I think Cyclone is purple, if I'm correct. It could be purple or it looks like black here, but either way, um we had Cyclone and we had green and purple, and then it went purple and yellow. And yellow had the weird thing where it's kind of like this like Stretch Armstrong thing where the leg was just kind of going freaking willy-nilly anywhere. Like once we got into that, like I was like, okay, I'm sold with this. Like I'm sold with the Kamen Rider part, but not the stuff out of it. I really didn't give a rip about it. I didn't care whatsoever. I was to just be like, you know what? If we could just get the Kamen Rider stuff and none of the other garbage, no. Um, I honestly feel like a lot of people, regardless of what I have to say, a lot of people like Kamen Rider W. I don't get why. I just don't like detective stuff. I really don't. Uh, but I think a lot of people like this show. I don't quite get why yet. I think I would have to go in and see more episodes to understand why it's so good. But I think a lot of people love it, and I don't get it. Uh, Kamen Rider G, the wine bottle goofy Kamen Rider. I just saw that on here and it looked weird. It just did. But Kamen Rider Decade. Kamen Rider Decade is the pink one. So big, massive brawl of all the Kamen Riders. It's like having me want to ask, like, what the heck is going on with all the Kamen Riders? Why are they battling? What's going on? But we have this kind of whole Thor idea where, like, we have 9 worlds, and I guess all the Kamen Riders are on them. And, like, all the worlds are starting to, like, just smash into one another. And we consistently are having this one, I guess, other Kamen Rider talking to our main one. I don't know which Kamen Rider this one is, because at some point, all of the Kamen Riders look the freaking same. They do. Like, a third of them are all wearing, like, orange hair, or a third of them are all just, like, looking the exact freaking same. Like, if anything, like to me, like this Kamen Rider could be Kamen Rider Kiva, but I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. But if anybody could go on and correct me, that would be completely fine. But it looked like Kiva to me because it kind of makes sense to have a Kamen Rider from a prior season to come into this one, kind of like Build was with the season that ends up coming up next. But so, and I'll get into Kiva. Oh my god. Oh boy. So Decade, we have the character that is kind of doing these photos, and all the photos are coming off very, very weird to the point of the writer in the story eventually getting into a fight with a bunch of these other guys. And so eventually, beyond just these weird photos that are kind of visually kind of cool looking, we have this Kamen Rider that is realizing his worlds are coming to an end. And beyond just the weird, goofy battle that is to just be a dream sequence for this one girl, eventually this one girl is to realize, as she's also going through all these other kind of worlds like our writer is, she eventually finds the driver for this Kamen Rider. And I was like, okay, like that is a just weird way to like get to this part, this journey, and this whatever. And we're also not really quite sure if this Decade Kamen Rider is to be a good guy or not, because it might be the fact that he is to be a bad guy, and I'm not quite sure yet. I'm not 100% positive about that. But so, with that said, I feel like Decade is one of the things to eventually go into after you've kind of seen a plethora of different Kamen Rider stuff. Because I think it really will benefit you if you kind of seen a bunch of other. Because in this one episode, we have like Kabuto uh, be one of the Kamen Riders that Decade turns into. And I think also he turns into either uh, Agito or Kuga, because both of them look the freaking same, and I can't tell which one is which. But yeah, either way, I think by the end of the episode we get to Kuga anyways. But yeah, so Decade is actually a pretty decent kind of episode, but again, it's one that you'd probably be better off after watching a couple of other ones. Get to it eventually. It does look really interesting. It really does. So, Kiva. Oh my god, Kiva. So, you know what? I should really be interested in this show. I really should be. So, we had the Watura story taking place in 2008. And then we also have the Yuri story that's being done in 1987. And I'm fighting to like the whole like two time period stories, because if anything we kind of see the commingling of how like the past is going to eventually be shown again in the future, and I can like that. But I really do not like this episode. I really don't like this episode. Really. We have Watura, and he has a very smelly house, and they gotta spend so much time on this kid having a smelly house. And then we have Yuri, that's in the past, and she's kind of like this Buffy or this like Blade character, and she's fighting this spider monster in the past that Watura ends up seeing the clawing on the door in the future. And it seems like throughout this entire episode, Yuri's doing a lot of the action heavy lifting. And then by the end of this episode, we finally have Wataru, who becomes the Kamen Rider by getting bitten by Kibot, the bat. And I was like, okay, that is the coolest way to have a driver being done in Kamen Rider history. I thought that that was so cool. But then, yeah, like, you have this just be like a really bad Blade Buffy show, and it just like ruined it. Like, we have Rotura, his stuff that's kind of going on is so bizarre and so just like, seriously, you're taking so much time on him trying to get all these fish, and it's all for him to just do this kind of cooking experiment that's all about him playing this violin, and I just don't get why. Um, the whole intro like thing when we get Kiva, I was immediately having like Queen of the Damned vibes, or I was feeling that like some Hellraiser stuff was going on in here. But then when I get into the episode, I'm like, I'm getting none of that. I'm like, there is so much potential, show, when you have your intro that doesn't really deliver on what it's going to do. Um, but when we get into that Kamen Rider action sequence, though, that I guess the Kamen Rider suit for Kiva, I guess, was to have been too heavy, because we have a bunch of freaking chains for this costume. I'm like, man, that probably has got to weigh a lot more than it usually does. And yeah, come to find out, yeah, the costume was far too heavy for the stuntman that did the whole fighting sequence. So I don't know if Kiva is gonna really have that chain suit for however long, or maybe they're gonna change the chains on that thing. But really, I want to see other Kamen Rider Kiva episodes besides this pilot, like, to see if it gets better or if it just gets more like bizarre or weird or obscure or whatever. I just didn't like this episode. I got more and more bored, where I was just screaming at the episode to just be like, come on, get somewhere. And it just continued to just do this weird, goofy thing. And I'm like, whatever, show. Kamen Rider Den-O. I really did not like the human Kamen Rider character. So, uh, oh, I guess I really should have been reading some of the descriptions of this also, because at some point they say the other character Kamen Rider name. Could have been a lot easier to just talk about this, but it doesn't always say that, but still. At some point it does come up in the description, but anyways. So, we have Nagami. Nagami sounds like a name that like is used in a ton of characters. They have that Gami thing down when it comes to any character names. But so Nagami is really down on his luck. We have this character that bizarrely is leaking sand for some goofy reason, because I guess he's to also be this demon. And the more and more I watch this episode, I'm like, I'm buying into this bizarrely, even though I completely hate the Nagami character. I hate him because this kid is to be the klutziest character you have ever known in your world. And in the very beginning of how we see him, like, he is having a bike in a tree. I don't know what it is with Kamen Rider and their fascination by putting things in a tree. Like, I think Kuga, at some point, for any time the monsters are to kill a character, they just put it in a tree. So I don't know. I think that happens in Kuga. I don't remember. I'm going to say it now and then probably be wrong later, but I know a Kamen Rider thing puts dead people in trees. It's weird. But so, it's weird. Everything has to be weird. And really, it's probably not. It's probably a creative way to to put. In all actuality, if you actually watch the Grimm show, in certain parts of those episodes, they do have the characters that get killed get put in a tree somewhere. So it's not out of the realm of oh my god, that's too weird. It happens in other things. But anyways, moving on. So Nagami is really bad on his luck to the point of him wanting to turn into this wallet to eventually go into this other alternate dimension that has this train where this woman gives him coffee. Like, what the heck is going on? I'm so fascinated by the show. But then also I'm like, what is going on? What's going on, show? So Nagami is really bad on his luck to the point of him like finding his way into getting beaten up by these goons. And one of the goons, I think, does become evil. But we also have this girl that comes off from the train from the other world. And she's going to go on and help Nagami become this masked rider, this Kamen rider. And so we have Nagami down in his luck getting beaten up by these goons. And then at some point, he has this kind of weird internal light switch that comes on, and he starts to become this demon. And then the demon has this metal pipe, and he's like, well, I'm just going to beat the crap out of you people. And we all of a sudden have this girl kind of run in, and she has kind of been looking for the device that Nagami took because it's part of the like it's like a passport, but then it's also like part of the driver to morph into the Kamen Rider. So, but anyways, we have this girl and she's watching on as this demonic guy is going to beat the crap out of these guys. But then once this girl comes into the fray and is looking at the Kamen Rider, we then have the human that retakes control of his body, and it's like, wait a minute, you shouldn't be able to do that. There's something about this guy that I guess he's not as weak as we thought he was after all. And the demon is even confused. He's like, wait a minute, what? Like, how are you doing this, buddy? So we then come to find that the girl is going to just kind of like take on this guy, and it's like, well, hey, where's the thing that you, like, obviously you found, because I need it. And so really, instead of going on and realizing that this girl is going to become the Kamen Rider, because that's where I thought maybe this was going, instead Nagami, after getting beaten the crap out of by this monster, like, this monster just takes Nagami and just beats the living crap out of him. We come to find that once this kid figures out how to become the Guyver or the Rider, I am the Rider, the Kamen Rider. Here's also the goofy thing. In every single one of these Kamen Rider seasons, we always have to bizarrely have them be called whatever their goofy second thing is. They're not called the Rider, they're not called Kamen Rider. Most of the time, they're just called Deno, or they're called Kiva, or they're called Decade. Why? Why not just call them the Rider, or why not just call them Kamen Rider? Why do they have to be called Decade? That makes no sense in my brain. Maybe there's something where any of these, like Deno or Kabuto or whatever, maybe those are just to be some kind of weird like nickname for any number of these characters, but maybe it's all about rights issues. Maybe they're trying to avoid calling these characters Kamen Riders for legal reasons in the show, or maybe you can only say Kamen Rider X number of times for the show. I don't know. But also, like for me, I'm also kind of thinking that Kamen Rider may have been kind of like bought and sold from a number of other people, and so I'm just kind of curious of why like they approach these things the way they do. I don't know, but moving on. So Kamen Rider Den-O. Eventually, yeah, like we get to where when Kamen Rider turns into Kamen Rider Den-O, we have kind of the cluster of attacks, and of course he ends up doing a non-kick critical attack. It mostly comes down to like I think the sword is the big critical move, and then eventually like uh, the two girl and guy both just kind of jump on the train and like okay hey like you're coming with me and we got to figure things out. And I was like okay like this is interesting, this is good enough, like I'm enjoying it, I'm liking it. So yeah, so Den-O could be interesting enough to eventually, if you're kind of thumbing through kind of the Kamen Riders, eventually get to Den-O at some point. Uh, I thought there was some kind of interesting things about Den-O, and it does have some kind of anime flavor to it. So give it a shot. Like there is a train time travel thing going on with this season, and I'm not quite sure what exactly all that means, but there's something kind of interesting going on there. There could be something cool. Common writer. Uh, Man, we were kind of getting in the weeds here. No, we're doing the right order. I thought we're going really off the rails. Um, Common writer Kabuto. So Kamen Rider Kabuto, don't really remember much of. I think this one is yeah, we so I knew I was gonna forget this one because really Kabuto was one that I consistently had to keep going back to and rewatching because I knew I'm gonna completely forget what this one was about. So we come to find in the very beginning, like Kabuto was very much tied into like this police force. In the very beginning, we have these minions and we have these kind of black mask riders with these guns and they're kind of firing away at these characters, and it's very police force heavy. And so eventually at some point in this episode we focus on this one character who's to be kind of very confident, and we're thinking I'm like oh that's going to be the guy who's going to become the masked rider. Like obviously like they're focusing so much time on this one character. And so we get to the point to where by the end of this episode we go and have this kind of mad scramble for the driver, and it comes into this hand of this one person who's like oh my god I've been waiting all my life to become the driver. And so he puts the driver and he ends up becoming the mass or the Kamen Rider. And I'm just kind of like okay like this isn't the title visual character, this is just some other Kamen Rider. What the heck is going on here? And so I'm like, well, like it's another Kamen Rider. He's very bulky, is um, very almost like War Machine from Iron Man Ash, where I'm assuming we're gonna get the other Kamen Rider model, and like he's gonna look more sleek and smaller and whatever. Um, but yeah, like Kabuto, nothing really about it like really stuck out to me, and obviously I'm having troubles trying to figure out what this episode even was, hence the problem with Kabuto. It's very forgettable, it's quickly forgettable. So I don't know if I would really recommend you going out of your way to seeing it. At some point you probably would want to because you've probably gone on to see everything else. So like Kabuto is really back end of the list. So let's go on and let's just get to Hibiki. Hibiki is the most long, stretched out episode of Kamen Rider, and the very beginning of it starts with this musical note thing, which really I was kind of like baffled about that. Then I was also just like, okay, this is another thing that they're trying to do because we have this like these two kids on the bikes, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, and they get into this song, and I'm like, what is going on here? They focus so much on this kid. I'm like, is this kid gonna become the first like child Kamen Rider? Is that where we're going? And no, it ends up just being that the kid eventually goes into this woods by the end of this episode, and we come in to have this other guy who has this tuning fork that he smacks onto his head, and he becomes the Kamen Rider. Okay? Why do we focus so heavily on one character, but then here's this other character coming in, and they're gonna really be the one that's gonna be the Kamen Rider? We have another one that does the exact same freaking thing, and I think that ends up being oh my god, which one is it? Five. Triple five. Triple five has, yeah. I'm trying to think of what triple five is. No. Uh, Agito. Agito. Um, oh my god, I am completely lost. I am completely lost. What happened? Uh, oh my god, I am gonna have some problems. I might have to pause here and just kind of reassess myself. Because I might be really lost when we come down to some later things here, and it's gonna come up really soon. Um, so Hibiki ends up having these drums for these weapons, and I was just like, okay, that's interesting. I'm assuming eventually somewhere down the road when we have more Kamen Riders, there's a whole like band that kind of comes together, and like there's something about Hibiki, the Kamen Rider Hibiki, that looks really interesting. Visually, it's just weird that they have this music theme, and that kind of ruins it. There might even be some interesting villains come down the road, but I think Hibiki is too slow to really have anyone give a rip, to really want to go through it. It's rough. It's a really rough watch. But moving on, let's talk about Kamen Rider Blade. Uh, um, mm, I might let me pause here. Let me kind of get my faculties about me, so I know what's going on in these other things, so I can kind of get back to, because I'm gonna be lost after Blade. So let me pause here for a second. Just give me a second. All right. I had to get my brain sorted because I'm like, holy crap! I'm like, I've gone through so many pilots. Like, I don't remember like where one and the other is gonna go. So eventually I needed a second here to just kind of reload my brain. So Kamen Rider Blade, we come to have an interesting story with this episode, as it seems that one of the Kamen Riders is turning on the other. I was like, okay, that's really interesting. We also get Kamen Rider Blade kind of start off with a battle with this kind of like whole bat character, And Kamen Rider Blade seemed very similar to me to Power Rangers SPD. Because at some point when they go on to, like, they beat the Bat villain, like, the Bat villain ends up just becoming this card, and they're kind of worried about how, like, the card is going to consistently be contained and all of that. And so, really, we have the Kamen Rider Blade that eventually comes to find that his other associate has kind of turned on him and is just kind of watching him from a distance. And Kamen Rider Blade is thinking, like, oh, well, he's going to help me out. He's going to help me fight this guy. And then when he walks away and he, like, isn't coming back, we have Kamen Rider Blade who's like, well, why? Why did you turn on me? Why? But Kamen Rider Blade is kind of putting the pieces together and really just figuring out that this guy had really just kind of turned on him anyways. Kind of, I guess, hashing it out in his brain, or there's some kind of real clips kind of going on where we're having, like, the veteran Kamen Rider kind of talking to this other associate, and he's kind of done with this kind of this company, and he's walking away. And so, yeah, so there's really, beyond that, there's not a whole lot kind of going on here. I think in this story we have the Kamen Rider who ends up losing his place, and so he's forced to uh move in this home that's kind of in the middle of nowhere with this one guy who's drinking this milk. I think that could be this episode, this Blade. I'm not 100% sure. But if anyways, again, to try to get this under 2 hours, let's try to move on as quickly as humanly possible. So, Kamen Rider 555. I knew I was going to have issues remembering the exact thing that I wanted to talk about for this episode. So, because this one immediately is actually an episode, the whole problem of it is that we have the focus being on really the wrong character, in all honesty. Because what ends up happening is we have this amnesia character, or this, no wait, this character that ends up going into a coma. I think we do have a whole character that does have amnesia. That probably does kind of happen consistently with Kamen Rider, but anyways, blah, blah, blah. So, Kamen Rider 555. So, this story focuses on a character that gets into a car accident with his family, and this character goes into a coma. When this character awakens from his coma, I'm assuming, like, man, the way that they're building this character up, I'm thinking that this character is going to go on and he's going to become the Kamen Rider. Man, was I wrong, but man, was this episode so built very, very well. And so we come to find that once this guy comes from his coma, and he'd even been dead and he was brought back to life, and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to become the Kamen Rider. Makes sense. So the guy comes back from his coma, and he had this whole life with this girl. And, like, the two of them are just kind of looking at baby pictures, and, like, they're playing out their lives with one another. And I'm like, man, this is great. And just that accident happens, and the guy goes into a coma, and his life is just flushed down the toilet. The guy goes back to his house, and the house is, like, no longer there. Someone else bought it, and so, like, the guy's like, what the heck is going on? And so the guy goes on to just be like, well, okay, I'm going to find my woman. I'm gonna find my woman, and we're gonna have our date, our anniversary date. That is to have us go on this bike and just have fun. And so the guy goes back to just tell the girl, he's like, well, hey, like, we're gonna have that date, right? Like, he's like Captain America, he's out of time. And so I'm thinking, like, that's where this story is heading. And come to find out, no. So the guy goes back to the girl and just be like, well, hey, we're still gonna have that date, right? And the girl's like, no. Like, if anything, like, this whole planning and this whole date or whatever was like yesterday to you, but it wasn't for me. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? And so all of a sudden the big, huge, massive guy comes in. He's like, this woman mine. This is my woman. Go away there, buddy. And so all this comes to a screeching head to where the guy eventually, by the later half of the episode, when we actually get the Kamen Rider and he goes on to fight his villain and whatever, we have the coma guy who is now looking face to face with the guy that stole his woman, and he's reflecting on the fact that his life, it seems like, because of that accident, like, everything has been taken away from him, and so he wants to go on and just take it back. And really, that just goes on to, like, have the guy turn into this monster and kill this dude. And I'm like, oh my god, why weren't you the Kamen Rider? And I was like, man, this was such a good story, but it ends up getting wasted on the wrong thing. And then we just have the Kamen Rider who's just going on and just taking out the monster that it needs to take out. And I was like, man, that is such a loss. Because there is no effort put into that other Kamen Rider story. Because what happens is we have this girl that is kind of making this whole road trip. And she has this kind of like backpack thing with her. And we come to find that there's some suspicious or sus folks that are kind of looking at this backpack. It's like, hey man, like, I think that could be the driver, and we really want that thing. And so this girl is getting some sus looks from all these people, some suspicious looks, some lingering about this whole thing that she's motorcycling around with. So we have this whole time taken up by this road trip story, which eventually leads to this girl ending up with this guy, this redheaded guy following her, and it's like, well, hey, like, you got to give me this bag. And at first we're thinking, like, there's so much twists and turns in this episode. It's so good writing wise because it has so many twists and turns in it, and so many things you're just kind of unexpecting from the story. And that's what makes it good. But then there's also, like, just me seconds ago saying, like, oh man, this one part of the story was wasted. But again, come with me on the story. It was so intriguing. I want to see where this goes more. I really do. And I want to see a Kamen Rider episode that has twists and turns in it. Unexpected story. It's incredible. 555, you gotta watch this 555 Kamen Rider. You gotta somehow figure out a way to watch this show. It's again going into the top 10 of Kamen Rider. At least it has good freaking story for once out of this show. Because man, is that hard to find. But yeah, so road trip turns into girl turning to the redheaded guy, and the redheaded guy's like, well, give me the bag. So the girl is like, oh my god, I don't trust you. And so she backs away from him, but then the person that she ends up turning to is to be a monster. And then she's like, well, I guess I can't trust you, so I guess I gotta trust the redheaded guy. So the girl with the belt just shoves it onto the redheaded guy. It's like, well, I guess you have to just become the Kamen Rider because it's the only thing that makes sense. So the guy whips on the belt and becomes the Kamen Rider, takes down the monster. It's like, well, I guess it was just lucky that this one guy was here. Even though he might not have been the best person to have been the Kamen Rider, he just becomes the Kamen Rider. Again, there was no time built up for this redheaded guy and his story. What the fuck? It kind of got me ticked, but I'm kind of curious about what happens in the other episodes. Just because the story just got me interested enough. So, top 10. It'll probably be like number 6, but at least it's somewhere up there. Next is to be Kamen Rider Ryuki. And I gotta say, the story and the visuals, ugh. But the villains, though. But them sweet villains, though. So, Ryuki has a reflection world. And that I thought was the coolest thing. Oh my god, that was awesome. So, it starts out, we have this woman, and she's putting makeup on in the mirror. I gotta put on all the makeup. And all of a sudden, she's realizing in the mirror, she has all this like weird webbing that is appearing on her. Again, going into the spider thing that it seems to be in almost every one of these freaking episodes of Kamen Rider, the pilots. So, I don't know if that's a traditional thing for them that they have to have like the same monsters, and I don't know. I don't know what that is, but it seems to be a consistent thing. Kiva, there was the spider monster in the very beginning of that too. Or yeah, Kiba. But so we had the woman, and she's kind of consistently in the mirror being wrapped with all this webbing, and she's like, what the heck is going on? And then come to find out when she is to touch the mirror, she's to have like the webbing kind of come out of her. And so this big, huge, massive spider grabs this woman from out of the mirror to pull her in. And I was like, wow, this is the coolest way to start this show. Dang, man. He did something good there. But then you turn around and you just have a crappy Kamen Rider just story. Because they focus a lot on the human side of this Kamen Rider, and he's this kind of news reporter. Comes off very much like Clark Kent Superman. And I hated it. I could go on and I could like a reporter themed Kamen Rider if it's handled well, but this really, to me, was not handled well. But so we have this reporter, and eventually he's doing this investigation and whatever, which all eventually leads to, at some point, a Kamen Rider being put into the reflective world, and this Kamen Rider looks very much like Batman. And we have this character going and taking on this massive spider, and I'm just kind of back and forthing if the big monster thing is to be a thing that looks cool or looks just stupid. I honestly think it looks cool just because it's variety. It's a big, massive monster instead of it just being some guy in a suit. You gotta give it that. I think probably most of that spider was probably CG, but it is what it is anyways. But yeah, so the Batman looking Kamen Rider ends up taking out the big massive monster. And yeah, I really think that once we get past the actual human Kamen Rider stuff and we actually get into the Kamen Rider battle, which I wasn't really jazzed about, because we have like the Kamen Rider who's kind of turning to the other Kamen Rider and it's like, well, hey, like, what the heck is going on? And we have this Kamen Rider that's just kind of taking things out and just kind of beating everything down, while the other kind of Kamen Rider is just trying to like, he's like, I've never done this before. So I think, yeah, I think I'm getting that right. I don't know. I'm probably butchering something. Um, but yeah, so like Ryuki, I feel like may get better with the reflection kind of side of it, but I don't really trust this common writer to give me something that I'm going to be satisfied with. I feel like I'm going to be very just disappointed the more and more I watch this show, because the only thing that I like about it is the kind of the reflection mirror thing. And I don't like anything else. I don't like anything. It sucks. It just does. So that ends up being what it freaking ends up being. Let's just move on to Kamen Rider Agito. So this episode we have a person that is kind of cosplaying as a Kamen Rider to eventually have the real Kamen Rider show up and just be like, hey man, like, what the heck are you doing? I'm just gonna go and just beat this monster down. And like, what are you doing? Because we have this blue Kamen Rider that they take so much time with him trying to find this one monster. And the Kamen Rider is to have this gun, which I'm like, okay, this is cool. Oh, oh my god, I completely forgot. Kamen Rider Geats. Uh, that that show came off so much like Judge Dredd to me. It was awesome. The weapon, the gun that Kamen Rider Geats has, and I just remember this now talking about this gun. So we have to where every time the Geats gun changes, like it says what it's going to do next. It's a rifle. It's a this. It's a that. It's a bazooka. Whatever. That's what I thought was so cool about Geats, because it reminded me of Judge Dredd, with what it was doing, and I thought that that was so cool. But anyways, back to Agito. So they focus so much time on this blue Kamen Rider that really is just the knockoff version. And so we immediately have him eventually doing this investigation, trying to find this monster, to have him in the park trying to chase this thing around, and they bring in the whole like truck thing, which I thought was kind of cool to kind of bring out this kind of motorcycle, because of course you have to have a motorcycle. You have to. So the blue Kamen Rider comes in and immediately tries to shoot this gun, and it does nothing. Like any of the other times you would have anybody come in and try to shoot guns on these monsters, like, dude, buddy, this does not work. You have to be the true legit Kamen Rider for a gun to work in this show. So, unless you come up with some weird Wemedyne bullets, I don't know. But so, the blue Kamen Rider comes in and is to shoot up this thing. And it does nothing. So, now the blue Kamen Rider is just punching. And I was like, this is freaking awesome. He's like punching this thing. He's punching this monster. I'm like, all right, like, I'm still won over by this. He completely has no weapons. So he's like, well, hey, I'm still going to try. I'm going to do my best. And this blue Kamen Rider is eventually, you can start seeing on like the screens or whatever, that his health is like deteriorating. And like, if I were that blue Kamen Rider, I would just be freaking crushed, because we then turn around and have Agito come in, and he's just like, well, yeah, I'm just gonna like have my wings just kind of flicker out, and then I'm just gonna whoop this monster, like, just do one freaking single hit, just take this thing out, just make the other blue Kamen Rider just like, you just stole my freaking thunder, you mother. But yeah, that's the only real thing that I know about Agito, was that whole thing about the blue uh, Kamen Rider, because he spends so much time on this character where he's going through these scenarios and he's shooting this gun off, to eventually have it all turn into naught by the end of this episode, because you're thinking that this one character is going to be the legit Kamen Rider, even though you know the title or you see the poster. But yeah, you're thinking the whole time this blue Kamen Rider is going to be the key, and he's just punching away at this monster, and then the other real legit Agito comes in, flips his little wings, and then just does one attack and just smokes him. It's like, what the fuck? I am so insulted. So let's move on. There's still so many freaking many Kamen Riders that I have to talk about here. We've been already talking for 2 hours. Why do we always have to do these long videos? Because I force myself. I could have done so many short videos, and that's what I should have done, but oh well, it is what it is. Kuga! Kamen Rider Kuga. Something about this reminds me of some Egypt themes going on, and that's what I liked about it. So we have this kind of unusual kind of coffin situation that is to be this kind of old-fashioned coffin that has the driver or the belt, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. We have the monster who is killing people and chucking them in trees, and so we have this kind of police force who's trying to investigate what's going on, all leading to eventually this whole coffin situation. We even have the guy who eventually is to become the Kamen Rider in this episode, and he bizarrely goes and tries to get into this tomb or this coffin or this whatever, and he fails at it, and bizarrely, like, all the cops are there, and so the writer goes on and it's just like, well, hey, look over there, as he tries to run into the I thought that was funny. I thought that was like, oh my god, like he's really trying to pull that off. But then the cop is just like, hey man, like I can really arrest you, like I could really just hold you just for no reason. Like just don't give me a reason, bub. And so we of course eventually have to realize that this one guy is eventually going to become this writer at some point. And so yeah, eventually he becomes the writer, and like the show is just kind of, it's interesting, but it again like is a long slog at some point. We have like some PowerPoint presentation that's kind of going on in this movie or in this episode, and like they're really kind of milking time at some point in this, but yeah, there's just, I would probably be interested to see where the show is going to head, but like this first episode really isn't completely selling me. Like there's some bits and pieces, but I really want this. I really want some Egyptian flavor in the season. I really want there to be some like heavy Egyptian things going on here. Like I want some Anubis villains, or I want something that's heavily tied into the Egyptian thing, to have me really just sold on this show, and I would heavily watch it a lot more. I know that Kuga, it seems, it's probably really easy to find and so on and so forth. But yeah, like I don't know if I'm 100% sold on Kuga. I don't know. I think at some point someone who has gone on to probably see Kamen Rider Kuga will probably say, "Hey man, it gets better," and I'll just be like, "Okay, sure, I have to just believe what you say there." Um, but yeah, but I'm kind of, I have my reservations about Kuga. I'm not really sold. So, like eventually I will go on to see Kuga. I'm not just rushing to just see it right now. Oh my god, I gotta see where Kuga goes. I could care less. I would rather watch a billion other Kamen Riders and then get to Kuga. Even though the whole season could be conveniently be able to have me see like tomorrow, still I don't care. To rush to get to Kuga. If anything, there's so many actually good stories, or there's so many kind of good things that I don't know. Uh, It'll be on the top 15 Kamen Rider things to see, maybe 20, depending on how many numbers of these there are. Kamen Rider Black RX. Really, this show is to really just be just like the American Mass Rider. And so, considering for how everyone is to go on and say how bad that was, I don't know if I'm going to go on and just be jazzed about Kamen Rider RX. If anything, the best thing about this whole episode is to eventually be where all the villains are showcased in one thing. And you have the Kamen Rider that's just banging against that kind of glass cell, and he's like, I'm trying to get out. I'm upset because I'm in this cage, this triangle cage that I'm in, and all the villains are just continuing to just come into fray and say things and do things and whatever, what have you, and forcing this Kamen Rider, like all the other early Kamen Rider stuff, to eventually, like, we have to sway him to work on our side and to work on evil. And the Kamen Rider's like, no, I can't for reasons. Because a bulk of the early Kamen Rider stuff, you always have it to where, like, the father or the professor of this Kamen Rider dies, and this Kamen Rider becomes a cyborg, and because they experiment on him and they whatever on him, and so uh eventually, like, it's just a story about, like, the Kamen Rider fighting against the villain to not have the Kamen Rider be swayed into becoming evil. It's really a bulk of the, like, just wait till the ship comes in and wait till you see all the villains, and then you'll just be happy. But really, I'm not really jazzed about Kamen Rider RX or any of the early Kamen Rider stuff because I just don't like it. I just don't like it. I really just don't. Kamen Rider Black. Really, this story is to be just called Kamen Rider Black Sun because really it focuses on a guy who is to get cherry picked. Well, not really cherry picked because we find out that this father is to have a number of his sons be taken to become Kamen Riders because this guy is to have been forced because he's been working with this company to then give in to them and in turn have to give up his sons to be able to become Kamen Riders. And so really there's some kind of real emotional beats kind of coming between this father and son, and really this episode is honestly not that bad. It's not like it's not that bad, but again, it's just a lot of just emotional beats that'll keep you intrigued in the episode. Uh, there was also like one Kamen Rider that I think eventually will come up in this early ones that I thought was just like, man, I really didn't like this at all. This was like the worst of the early Kamen Rider ones. I didn't like that at all. And we'll get there, hopefully, eventually. Uh, so yeah, like really out of this early stuff, it's all the same. There's not much to really pull from. But then we get into Super 1. Super 1, we come to find that this guy is experimented on. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'm won over. And then we have him be experimented on, and he has these gloves. And what I have gone on to hear about Kamen Rider Super 1, as he's consistently called Super 1, instead of Kamen Rider, which annoyed the crap out of me. We come to find that I guess this actor who had gone on to play this Kamen Rider is a scam artist. I don't know the whole story of it, but for whatever I've heard, like this guy has pulled some shenanigans. And really, I could go on and say that there's oftentimes when you are to go into every show franchise, eventually at some point, there are to be some scam artists that you're just disappointed that that person who is to have really been on a show to be this superheroish character is really just this scumbag at some point. Like look at the Power Rangers. At some point there was to be the Power Rangers Wild Force Red Ranger that is in prison now. And come to find out who knows how many other number of other Power Ranger characters have done some horrible things, who knows, behind closed doors. But anyways, Super 1 I thought was actually, for the early Master Riders, was I think the best one. I really liked this episode. Even though most of it was just kind of showcasing what the fists or the hands do, I thought that this, like, Super 1 actually looked cool out of all the other early Kamen Riders. But then also, I thought the episode was really intriguing. Like, you had the Kamen Rider that is kind of actually working out, and he's doing all these, like, flips and stuff, and he's trying to figure out how to transform. And, like, he's doing all these, like, gymnast, like, moves, and we have this kind of, this, this this professor or this scientist that's with the Kamen Rider, and like the Kamen Rider is trying to figure out like, well, how do I transform again? How do I do this? And like by the time that he's to get the answer, that's when we have all the villains come in and they're wreaking havoc on this in this laboratory. That's the right word. So by the time we get to the real action, and we're possibly thinking that the Kamen Rider is going to transform by the end of the episode, that's when they cut it off. I'm like, mother, what? You give me the part where there like it's potential that it's gonna be a really good part of the episode, and you cut it off? You show. You. I get it, you only had X number of minutes to go into this show, but man, you cut off at the wrong goddamn part. This show is going to get interesting, and that's when you decided, oh, no. You're going to watch the next episode, right? You. You. No. Don't do that garbage to me. So, one thing that I'm kind of hoping, but I'm not 100% sure. There is a Kamen Rider thing that is to also be called Sky Rider. And I don't know if this is what this thing is. But man, if you were to go on and watch Kamen Rider / Sky Rider, man, was that episode good. So I'm just going to talk about Sky Rider now. The Kamen Rider / Sky Rider thing, because man, was that show good. Because immediately when I saw this Sky Rider thing, like you have a character that is on this, God, what is it called? This huge, like, kite thing, and he's the goofy looking kite thing. I don't know what they're called, but he's like flying on them, and all of his friends are on this camp, and every one of the friends that are in this camp ends up getting killed. They get dragged down to the ground, and I'm like, man, this is some horror, like, this is some crazy stuff. And I'm like, this Sky Rider ends up going and eventually talking to this professor. And this professor is like, well, hey, you want none of what's going on with any of these monsters or nothing. Like, you don't want to know what's going on here. And the guy's like, well, I just got to know. My friends are dead. I need to know what's going on. So, for this Sky Rider story, it kind of, like, breaks down as if, like, you're going to get cursed if you're going to get involved in any of this. And that's what I thought was like the best part of this like Skyrider story. And eventually how this character uh, becomes the Kamen Rider, and then by the end of the episode he's just flying. I'm like, all right, I'm won over. I'm loving this show. But that whole curse thing, that's what got to me. That's when I was like, oh man, this is something good. There's something special here. Because whenever I was to have gone on and watched like the Supernatural CW show, and you would always have the hunters, and they're just like, hey man, you want none of this. If you know anything about what we're doing, like you're gonna regret it for the rest of your life. You're gonna somehow like have this just kind of come back on you. And that's what I liked about that show, and that's what I thought was really good about this whole Skyrider Kamen Rider thing. And I hope that's what this was. I could be wrong, but man, yeah, um, probably. Let's. I that's where I'm gonna go with that story, anyways. I don't really care if that's not what it was. I'm gonna go with it anyways. Kamen Rider Stronger, man. Kamen Rider Stronger actually just breaks down to me like Batman 66 does. If they could have a punch in this thing and they have the words BAMF or or whatever, that's what this show would have broken down to me. Kamen Rider Stronger has the weirdest looking visuals. The head is too big, the horns are too big, and then you kind of get the puffed up uh like the weird puffed up chest thing. But not only that, you get the female sidekick who is the human tackle thing, and I was like, what is this? What is this? She's like the Robin or the cat, the Batgirl, and really she's just kind of like the one redheaded girl from Scooby Doo. She's just really there to eventually get nabbed by the end of the episode, and Kamen Rider Stronger has to come in and save her. I'm like, seriously, if that's what happens in every single one of the episodes, I would have no interest in Kamen Rider Stronger whatsoever. And in all honesty, I didn't have very much interest in it anyways. Kamen Rider Stronger scene, and like they had a goofy kangaroo like villain that was like very metal, and I was like, okay, this is very strange. It's interesting, but then again, I'm like, oh my god, every bit of visuals on this episode was so rough. And you have like uh the black minions that were kind of interesting with what they were doing, and there was just certain things about this episode that I really wanted to try and like I was trying, but it was just, man, everything about this episode was so freaking bizarre. um and it reminded me too much of like old Batman, and it's just nothing about it. Nothing. It's probably not the worst Kamen Rider, but man, is it up there. Because I think what's going to really hit the taco is going to be something that's going to come up soon. Kamen Rider Amazon. Amazon. I liked this. I weirdly did. So, Kamen Rider Amazon reminded me of stuff like Tarzan or like the Jungle Book, the we have the Kamen Rider that does not speak English, but most of the time you're just seeing his like they focus on his teeth consistently in this, and I'm like, man, I think that the Kamen Rider coming from like this savage land, and if anyone is to have ever gone on and read a X-Men comic book where they had the Savage Land, those stories were always really cool to me. I always really liked the X-Men Savage Land stories. Man, if we could have a Kamen Rider Savage, that would be pretty sweet. If they could somehow kind of bring back the Amazon like character and make him just savage, or just the Drifter. The Drifter story could just have eventually be like a savage Drifter character, like how in the old Incredible Hulk show was, where he's kind of thumbing it at the end of every episode. Or you just kind of have like a Wolverine kind of thing where like the Wolverine part is just very savage. I don't know. But this I thought that this was great. I thought it was great. We have this Kamen Rider who eventually is to leave his Amazon after talking to this kind of old sensei like character. I think that's where I was trying to go with for Kamen Rider Ghost, because Kamen Rider Ghost and Kamen Rider Amazon have kind of like some kind of similarities. Because even looking at the old uh, sensei-ish looking character, I'm like, that looks like the exact same guy from Kamen Rider Ghost. But so we have this Tarzan-ish like character leaving his Amazon to go to Japan to meet with this guy. And so eventually he does go on to make his way to Japan, and that leads with another huge massive spider character, which once you have uh Kamen Rider Amazon and the spider character, excuse me, when you have them duke it out in this episode, I'm like, oh man, I'm all for this. Yeah, this is sweet. And so, but first you have Tarzan character who makes his way to the States, and he's all just like teeth. You gotta consistently see his teeth. My teeth are effed up, but it is what it is. But yeah, just consistently just close-ups of this character's teeth for some goofy reason. And so we eventually have the guy that Tarzan is supposed to meet up with here, and we have the professor does this like this weird, goofy, like, hey, we're friends. Hey, I know that you're a Kamen Rider. I'm gonna do this finger thing for you to understand that we're friends. Whatever that goofy thing is that they do, I don't remember what it was, but man, was it just like, yeah, we're friends because I know you're a Kamen Rider. And Amazon is like, yeah, I can do that symbol too in Kamen Rider, right? Yeah, we're friends, right? Yeah, we're besties. And so the spider monster goes on to attack Amazon. And I have to pronounce it that way. I don't know why. Um, not the Amazon, the internet conglomerate that has everything and whatever. The Kamen Rider. Man, if only we would have had Kamen Rider Amazon in Amazon, that would have been a funny commercial. Go with it, Amazon. Go with it. Uh, anyways, that'll be a hard pull from some ancient thing that they are just trying to make a commercial out of. It's weird. But anyways, so yeah, so we have the Tarzan character that meets up with the guy, and they end up getting separated because the spider. And so the Amazon turns, or we have Kamen Rider Amazon that turns into Kamen Rider, and he fights off this monster. But that's not all, because the spider keeps coming back. So the Kamen Rider doesn't definitively kill off this monster. He keeps having to fight with it. So the doctor ends up going to the hospital and ends up calling his family to tell him, like, hey, I'm in the hospital because I got beaten up by this huge, massive spider thing. And so this young kid has to go and find Kamen Rider Amazon. Oh, well, I think this one girl kind of goes with him because she's trying to find this kid. So they all go back to the hospital together to meet with this guy. And by the time that they get there, the guy that Amazon is trying to get to ends up getting killed by the spider. And so Kamen Rider again has to turn into Kamen Rider to fight off this threat. And I'm like, yeah, this is pretty sweet. I feel like such a simpleton to just be so enjoyed by this episode. Or I feel I don't know, I just don't feel good that I liked this, but I really did. I somehow just I can say that I really don't like the cosmetic look of how this Kamen Rider ends up becoming, but I liked everything else about this episode. It was good to me. I really enjoyed it. Really, I would feel Kamen Rider Amazon would probably be in my top 10. At some point, I want to watch more of it, even though you have a Kamen Rider that doesn't really even speak. I don't really care. Like, I just want to see how this story plays out. I want to see more Tarzan, Savage Man against other monsters just banging it out. Just give me some more of that banging it out. Just give me that. So now we're moving on to Kamen Rider X. Kamen Rider X is to me to be the worst Kamen Rider episode thing I'm to go on and see. It's the worst. It really is. Really, I don't like by the later part of the episode where you have, like, it's all about the father and son connection here, because we have the father that gives the son the bulletproof vest thing, and by the end of this episode we have the father who is in this torpedo thing and he gets shot out, and this is to all just be uncovering that this island is to be some weird base thing that the Kamen Rider is to eventually be in, like it's like the Fortress of Solitude kind of thing all over again for Superman, but this is to be like this Kamen Rider's Fortress of Solitude. I think, though, the one takeaway I think from this entire episode was, I think the monster I think was really cool. The monster with the hair, but it looked like a cat-like thing, and it was hilarious because it had these scissor hands, and it was saying scissors, scissors, and I was like, oh my god, this is freaking hilarious. I'm hoping that this is the monster that I'm right about, because if anything, eventually Kamen Riders all become a blur. But the monster that had the whole scissors thing, I was laughing. I was like, oh my god, this is the best ever. Because it kept saying scissors. And I was like, this is some good stuff. What, like, why hasn't there ever been a monster that's just scissors? And it seriously just says scissors. It's freaking hilarious. Like, really, it's some adult comedy now, but, like, it's good stuff. It really is. But Kamen Rider X, sorry, just split all over myself. Split. Not spit. Split. But yeah, so Kamen Rider X out of all these is the freaking worst. It really, I've like, just the father son thing, and we go into the flashback of the father picking up the son, but really he's just kind of picking up to slam him down or something. Like, we have this very distant dad who's kind of a jerk to his son. But it's like, well, hey man, you're gonna become the Kamen Rider, right? I really hated it. I really didn't like it. Volume 3, Kamen Rider V3. So I actually really liked this episode. We come to find that the Kamen Rider character, like, his life is getting threatened by all of this stuff because he's coming in, and like there's one, I think in the very first Kamen Rider episode we have this like motorcycle trick thing that like, or this motorcycle ride thing that keeps kind of zooming into the camera consistently, and I thought that was freaking annoying. Like, a lot of stuff that I think was happening in the very first pilot episode of the very first Master Rider thing was milking out the episode. Clearly. Like, they needed just seconds to burn on this episode. And so much about it was very, like, repetitive. And I was so irked about that. Like, they had nothing to do in the episode, so they just decided that they just kept repeating things over and over again. Freaking sucked. But so, V3, the reason why it's called V3 is because there's two other Kamen Riders in this show that help this newer Kamen Rider out. So, yeah, there technically is some collaboration going. So you'd have to go on and see probably the early Kamen Rider stuff to then understand what's going on in V3. But I didn't really care. Really, for me, I was just like, okay, I can just enjoy this episode because it's actually pretty decent. So this guy goes on and he's going to drink his cup of coffee, but his daughter ends up scaring him, so he drops the coffee, and all of a sudden his house starts to burst into flame, and then they realize that the chemical that's to be in this coffee, it's like, oh, you could have died. And so this Kamen Rider is like, man, I'm really like, I almost had a like a motorcycle accident before, like, and now I'm drinking this drink, and I almost would have died. This guy is feeling cursed. So eventually, it all comes down to the Kamen Riders getting kind of stuck, and this newer Kamen Rider ends up saving them, and he had gone on to lose all of his family. This newer Kamen Rider, and I'm wondering if maybe the scissors monster was supposed to be in V3, and I'm getting confused because it. But scissors. Man, if it wasn't V3, then I'm like, man, I'm gonna rewatch this episode again and just enjoy it because it actually was good. I liked it. I maybe didn't like the visuals of this episode altogether. Nothing about it was visually pleasing, but just the story was good enough. It was good enough. So, this Kamen Rider, the reason probably why he's called V3 is because vengeance. And not just volume 3. It is what it is. Man, they just lazily phone in these names for these Kamen Riders at some point. It's just like X, and how about we just call him XL, and how about we just super extra awesome delicious Kamen Rider? How about we just call him that? All right, sounds great. But so this Kamen Rider is to have had his family died, and so this Kamen Rider is looking to the other Kamen Riders and is like, well, hey, you gotta make me a Kamen Rider so I can seek vengeance on these people who had taken my family from me. Because there had been one point where this guy had been taken away by this ambulance that wasn't actually the legitimate ambulance. So the guys are scrambling to get to that guy, and luckily they were able to get back to him. But so that eventually leads to the monster coming in, killing this family. So the guy's like, well, hey, I want vengeance. And the other Kamen Riders are like, no, like, you can't go on and be a Kamen Rider if you have like vengeance in your heart. Like that's not how we work. And I'm thinking, I'm like, man, has there been any other Kamen Riders that eventually become Kamen Riders because of vengeance? That would actually be a sweet story. I honestly think a Kamen Rider should be like having this revenge agenda because that would be freaking sweet. But why would they go on and do that? Like a monster just killed somebody and it's like, okay, like I guess that person who died doesn't really matter, right? Man, there's a story that they're missing out here, and it's all about vengeance. So what happens is the newer Kamen Rider goes and saves the other Kamen Riders, and so they're like, well, okay, since he saved us, we're gonna turn around and make him a cyborg because he died saving us, so we're gonna help him. And so that leads to have the other two Kamen Riders that are kind of up against the odds. They're outnumbered. And that, of course, brings in the new Kamen Rider to come in and just whip everybody's butt and take everybody down and really kind of give us an enjoyable end to this episode. So, with that said, that goes on and brings us to the finale of the last Kamen Rider, which I do realize that there's two different Kamen Riders probably in this one Kamen Rider show, like it shows in B3, but I'm only going to focus on the one pilot of the one character. So, we, in the first Kamen Rider parts of this, we have to really focus on a villain called Shocker for some goofy reason. And to me, in my brain, I'm thinking, like, well, is Shocker the spider character, or is he just like a monster of the week? Because again, for the very first episode of this Kamen Rider thing, we go to this monster who is kind of in this chair, and he's the spider monster, and he's talking like he owns the place. So I'm like, so bad guy, the big bad guy. There's certain times where I have to go on and just kind of ask questions about the show because I have no clue what's going on at certain points. Because I don't really know who certain characters are or if they're going to become either the bad guy or the, like, when I was to watch Kamen Rider X8, Paradon, the guy who was talking to Graphite in the pilot episode, I'm like, is he the big bad villain? Because he's talking to Graphite, and I'm like, he's the villain, right? He's talking about his heart singing, all this goofy crap, and I'm like, that makes him the villain, right? Just because he's talking weird. But I don't really know if he's the villain of this story. At some point, I guess I will figure out later on that he is the villain. But like right now, I'm like, he's just talking to the monster character, and I guess you just have to assume he's the villain. I don't know. They didn't really put that together that well. But also, I didn't talk about that when we actually got into the actual X-Aid thing. But then also, Asuna turns into this Poppy girl at the end of that episode. And again, I didn't thoroughly review every single one of these episodes. I really didn't. At some point, I really will go into thoroughly in depthly every bit of what happens in these Kamen Rider episodes, but I just don't feel I really want to at this point. Like, I feel like I want to do this kind of video so I can allow myself to just kind of be more vague, and then at some point go back into this stuff and be more specific and why I really enjoyed every bit and moment of whatever of any of this. But again, it'll also come down to if even Kamen Rider is even trending. So let's wrap this up. So Kamen Rider The last of it, the very last episode. Again, it all comes down to that the common writer of choice ends up being uh, kind of made into a cyborg by all these green and red alien looking characters. But then eventually we see later some professor guys, so we're like, okay, wait a minute. Like, so there always has to be some professor or some dad guy who ends up getting taken in by the villains. And again, all this stuff always seems so same. So like it's kind of very hard to pull between any of these. It's very tough. But again, with kind of how this common writer story is told, it feels like I've already kind of talked about it throughout any of the other ones, because it's really just the same cyborg story. Because also any of the early Master Rider ones, besides really just Amazon and Stronger, really are just the same recycled thing. And eventually, of course, the Kamen Rider goes on to become a cyborg. And of course, instead of going and choosing the villain side, he ends up fighting against them and destroying the spider character. Same old, same old. So, with that said, yeah, there's nothing really concrete that I could even talk about, like the last or the original Kamen Rider thing, because it's been done far too often. If anything, I think the Shin Kamen Rider is the exact same as the original show. So, what are they really trying to do besides just recycle the same old stuff again and again and again with this original Kamen Rider thing? I think that's why I really didn't want to talk about the early seasons of Kamen Rider, because it's the same stuff. So with that said, I think I'm gonna go on and just get out of here. I'm gonna wrap this up. Really, I want to say I'm sorry for how not heavily in detail I was with any of these, or really, I just needed a moment of time to figure out what the heck any of these things were. At some point in the future, if it seems that Kamen Rider is interesting to anybody, I hope to go on and justify wanting to do more reviews of Kamen Rider. Because if there is any Kamen Rider things that are actually trending, or if people really like Kamen Rider for some goofy reason, I will hope to try and go on and do more of this. Especially, like I said, X-Aid was actually one of the favorites of all of these. And I hope that that isn't to be a mistake to just say that, like, I lucked out and saw one episode of Kamen Rider that I actually liked, and then it just goes downhill from there. Because I had heard also from a number of people that they thought that X8 was really good, and I was like, I thought that too. Like, I'm hoping I get to watch more of all of this stuff and really like it and really enjoy it. But with that said, I've been going on for almost 3 hours talking about this, so at some point I need to just call it a day. And I think once we were almost at 3 hours, I'm just kind of so disappointed in myself how long these take. Plus, also, no one's gonna go in here and be like, 3 hour thing? I'm not gonna watch that. This guy's insane. Why does he put 3 hour videos up? This guy is just gonna lose all of the 3 hours? Oh my god. Plus, also, I wasn't good at kind of breaking down everything. Because, man, I think I took way too long in just kind of setting this all up, too. Oh well. On to another day of possibly recording a number of things. Uh, in the future, I think I'm going to have to go on and talk about the Fall Guy movie and Boy Kills World. But I'm going to just kind of combine that together into one review because it's kind of the exact same movie. Um, really. hopefully from what I can remember from either one of those films, because it's kind of been days now since watching them. But I hope to review those because I kind of have that planned. Uh, I have no idea what I'm going to go on and I'm going to review past this moment, besides just what I said there, because I already technically have that planned. Uh, Tarot. That movie actually looks really interesting, and of course, it's it's an easy sell for me. Any of the other things that I think are coming out of brand new, like or new release stuff, like I think I've taken too long to talk about them, so that might be a problem there because I really think Abigail is an interesting movie, but really the longer of which that I kind of go on to do other things instead of that, what's going to be the point of that? But hey, at least I'm doing videos. At least I'm trying. At least I'm trying to put something out. So that's all I can say at this point. Uh, but yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. It's 3 hours. If people watch this video, I will just be happy. I really will, because this is a long video, and also it's on Kamen Rider. Who knows if people are really gonna like this video? So thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye, bye.